want more out of your love, sex, romance, everything. You're curiouser. So am I. In this live, I'm sharing my thoughts on life, love, passion, and creating something that is far better than I ever could have dreamed. Welcome to Curiouser.
Hello, 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 hello. How you doing today? I am feeling remarkably bubbly, I guess, today. Not sure why. Got no reason for it. Got no reason not to, but there you are. Hello to everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Heather, also known as Nookie or Miss Nookie. I live an amazing personal life full of love, sex, passion, exploration, adventure. And because I want to share that with others and help others realize the same thing for themselves, I write books, I teach workshops, and I offer coaching for better love, sex, romance, and kink for people of all genders, relationship statuses, orientations, and more. Hello, Sabyasachi. Hello, Celine. Hello, Cobalt. Good to see you. Thank you, Sabyasachi. The scarf is actually a gift from my partner when we were out in California last year, just a little bit before this time, so about a year ago. This was the California gift he got for me, and I absolutely adore it. Hello, Calvin. Good to see you. So, why can't they just be direct? Oh, I heard exactly what you meant. Why you gotta be so rude and blunt? If these were Jeopardy clues, the winning question would be, what are phrases heard in high context, low context relationships? It's so frustrating. Literally the first 34 years of my life were spent not understanding why people couldn't just say what they meant, or why people reading so much more into what I said than I said. And so I spent the next 7 years or so slowly figuring it out. Now, I still slip up once in a while, and I still get freaking frustrated when people are super obtuse. But I'm so much better than I was. And in this live, I'll share with you where high context and low context people or situations clash, and why and what you can do about it in your relationships. Thank you, Cobalt. Watering cans, yes. I just got them not too long ago at a little pop-up art place. So, also, please don't forget, I love it when you comment or ask your questions in chat. I keep an eye on the scroll at all times to engage with you. So please ask your questions. Don't feel like you're ever introducing me. I'm going to get into some nuance and be a little geeky today, because I'm not only incredibly passionate about this topic, but also because understanding the concepts I'll present has made such a huge difference in my communication skills and abilities. And sharing that with you means a lot to me. So, why can't they just be direct? Oof. I feel you deeply in my core. I'm a direct person. And because of the way my brain is wired, put together, whatever, I miss a lot of subtlety. It's so much easier for me if you just say what you want and need so that I can respond. And honestly, I get that usually from those I hold close to me. They have learned to communicate with me in the best way possible, and it makes them happy to do so. So win-win. However, not everyone is willing to change that aspect of themselves or able to change that aspect of themselves. It's deeply ingrained. And frankly, the world is a more wonderful and varied place because of it. So, what can people like me do when we just don't understand subtlety? Well, first, I think it behooves us to try to learn to pick up signals that something is amiss. Now, note, I didn't say wrong. I mean, we ought to try to look for signs something is wrong as well. But it's not just wrong we're looking for. It's anything out of the ordinary, anything that might surprise us or make us think, I wonder why they said that. Like, they may be suppressing the desire to tell us about their amazing day, but want to be sure we want to hear by asking about it, for example. So look for those signs. Calvin, you say, I'm very shy. Does this affect my communication skills? Yes. Quite frankly, it does. Right? Because a lot of shyness is directly related to rejection sensitivity. And so when you are super shy, hello, Rob, lovely to see you. When you are super shy, you'll have a tendency to not speak up and advocate for yourself or put yourself forward in situations where you feel like you might end up with some sort of offense or rejection, right? And that is going to hinder you. But hopefully, through these communication lives, you'll get the opportunity to sort of step into that part of yourself and maintain the core of you that cares very much how other people experience you in conversation, while also learning to communicate a bit more fully. Cobalt says, by the time it's wrong, it may be way more complicated than when it's just feeling off. Oh, yes, exactly. Because by the time it's wrong, there's probably already some sort of like real misunderstanding in there, right? And we don't want to go all the way into, a kerfuffle when hey, real quick, you said this, I'm not sure I quite understand that. Can you tell me where you're coming from? Would have smoothed everything out, right? A lot of times what people will do is they'll sort of take something and they'll be like, ding, I'm not sure I understand that, but I assume it means, A, B, C, LMNOP, and then they run with it and create a misunderstanding because they weren't quite right. So look for something being amiss. Look for little subtle signs. And also pay attention to that ding in your head, right? That, I'm not sure I understand that feeling. Most of us are very quick to sort of brush that off, make an assumption, and continue with the conversation. However, that is a great way to foster misunderstanding and create friction. Cobalt says, right, it's taken me a long time to halt that process, back that truck up, and ask, which leads me into exactly what I was going to say. Thank you for that. So we're going to halt that process, back the conversation up, beep, 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 and ask questions. Is there something you'd like to tell me? Is there something I should know? Is there anything wrong? How are you feeling? Is everything okay? Could you explain that last bit to me? Huh. I guess I'm a little surprised that you feel that way. Could you be more clear? Or, hey, you said this, and before you've said that, can you tell me how those two things go together? Right? So clarifying any ding that goes off in your head. As much as possible, use open-ended, general, and language that is not accusatory, right? Instead of, are you upset? How are you feeling? Right? Is everything okay? How was your day? Right? That allows them, your partner in this conversation, to choose whether they are ready to share or not. And frankly, it is a choice. One of the things that's really important to keep in mind is that in any conversation, in a relationship, you do not have a right, you are not entitled to what somebody else thinks and feels. So asking rather than demanding allows for deeper trust in conversation. Hello, KS. Good to see you. Life is good. You say throughout high school I was shy, and I even currently as an adult. Yeah, absolutely. And so again, I'm not sure if you caught the part where I was talking to Calvin about being shy. If not, hopefully you can catch that in the replay. That was just a little bit earlier. And talking about how shyness can actually, super affect how you communicate with others and how you connect. Calvin says, I try to communicate to my wife in the heat of passion, my cuckold desire, but she didn't pick up on the hint. Yeah, that is absolutely not a heat of passion type of thing. In fact, that's the sort of thing that you really want to approach in a measured fashion, not just for yourself to get the most out of the conversation, but to honor your partner and where their head might be, right? So if your partner has a hard time opening up, there are things you can do to help make that happen. So first thing, it's about making the offer. Like when they do or say something and you go ding, make a note of what they said and the expressions or behaviors that led you to that information or that behavior for the next time. So in a relationship, perhaps you'll recognize their signals more quickly and more accurately. So how do I explain this? So in my view, this very much falls under the heading of doing things that will make them healthy and happy and feeling loved is who I am in a relationship, right? So I endeavor to pay attention to my partner's like common tells. Celine, for example, I'm going to pick on you here a little bit. This was years and years and years ago. Celine, for a long time, looked to me as sort of an external conscience, right? I was sort of her Jiminy Cricket. And when Celine wanted to do something that she knew, like deep down inside, was absolutely not good for her, or actually felt wrong for her to do, but she knew she was going to do it anyway, she wouldn't ask me about it. She would duck around it. And then afterwards, when she was telling me about it, I would make a note, ding. She has a pattern of not telling me when she wants to do it and she's going to do it anyway. So we talked about that, and it took a little while, but I think, and Celine can, obviously confirm or deny this, I think we've gotten to the point where I made it very clear I am not telling her what to do and what not to do, and I will never, ever do that. Her life is up to her to choose, even if she chooses something that I think is absolutely bad news, and she's done it. But that our friendship and us talking things out is still valuable to her, even when she's going to go ahead, even when she knows she's going to disagree with me, even when she's going to do that thing that she knows is not good for her, right? And she will say to me, I'm going to do this thing, and I know it's probably a bad idea, but I think I'm also going to get things out of it. Celine, I knew what was coming when you started that sentence. Of course you did. Of course you did. Right? Cobalt said, I am the son and the heir of shyness that is criminally vulgar. Morrissey. There you go. Right? So, like I said, checking in with people and making notes about the things that they do and their patterns in communication so I can file them away and pull them back out when necessary. If I fail to do this, because I'm not wired that way, it's not something that I will personally take responsibility for. Let me be clear on this. If my partner cannot find a way to communicate with me in a way I understand them, and I'm not a mind reader, which I most definitely am not, then what we've got here is a failure to communicate.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Geeky technology stuff. Woohoo! Cobalt says, nobody wants to be thought of as an asshole. Yes. And for those of you who don't know, an askhole, A-S-K-H-O-L-E, is somebody who is constantly asking for advice, but they're using it more as a form of validation. I'm asking you for advice so you can give back to me the advice that I want and make me feel validated in my decisions. And then when they get something they don't want, they sometimes get upset or they just ignore it and don't have any graciousness for it. So there's a big difference between I am wanting to bounce something off of you and talk things through with you versus what do you think I should do? I'm thinking about doing this. Don't you agree? Right? Sabyasachi says, is this something like introvert nature in all of us? Can that be the reason for poor communication? I mean, that can absolutely be a reason for poor communication, but these are actually two different things. And I'll be clarifying even more as we go further for high context versus low context. KS says, can a person's mentality and attitude make it difficult to open up to a person? Oh, absolutely. For example, KS, you have been here through some of my lives where people have come in and, been rude. Now, if you saw me coming down hard on them for being rude, you might think, they deserved it. But you've also seen people say things that were maybe, like not rude, but definitely sort of like way off base. And I endeavor to be, as a human, kind and compassionate in situations like that, so that even shy people like yourself and Calvin can feel comfortable asking the questions that you desperately want answers to without feeling that I am for no reason going to attack you, or even for good reason, because you may not be aware of what comes across as rude or not rude, right? And that matters. So yes, absolutely. It can be very hard to open up to somebody who has been aggressive or pushy. And if you're naturally a shy person, it can be difficult to open up to anyone, right? Calvin says it'd be good to have a group to talk about our sexual desires. Well, you should join Dating Kinky if you have not, and make sure and get into the membership. And if you have an interest in the cuckolding, reach out, because we do have a group specifically for non-monogamy with a cuckolding core that you can get as an add-on. And we're about to really start some additional content going into that, right? So, oh, and real quick, before I continue, please don't forget to like this video and share it wherever you find me. It is such a huge help for me to have people recommend me to their friends and or groups or pages online. Shout out, thanks so much to Cobalt, who has been on Reddit, where I don't really have much of a presence, and has been sharing my videos and content there. So thank you very, very much for that. I really do appreciate it. I have personally found that I don't have the personal energy to be everywhere, and I don't really have the desire. So to have, raving fans in different areas who are willing to share what I'm doing, just thank you. It fills my heart, right? So going back to, why can't they just be more direct? Well, there are lots of potential reasons. Maybe they were raised in a culture where asking directly for something is considered uncouth and rude, right? Maybe they've been negatively reinforced when they've asked for things for themselves in the past. Perhaps their fear of not getting what they want or of rejection makes them feel that not directly asking for it might lessen their pain. Whatever the reason, I think it's important to keep one thing in mind as you navigate this. You have them in your life for a reason, and it's worth working your way towards them as you encourage them to work their way towards you. So here we get down to the crux of it. There are two types of people in communication, and two very different ways of looking at things. We all do some of both, but some people are much more inclined towards one or the other. And honestly, many tend to view their non-dominant processing or communication style as suspect somehow, right? Like, the way I do it is right, any other way is wrong. Calvin says, rejection is hard, but when I do speak out and it's received, it builds my confidence. Exactly. That is absolutely key. And I would highly suggest, if you're open to the sorts of things, looking into the Take No Shit workshop. I'll talk a little bit about that later. I know you've heard about it, but it really is a way to look into sort of building your communication style through boundaries building blocks, and understanding how ethical and wonderful it is when people communicate well with you, so you give that gift to others. Cobalt could probably back me up on that. Celine probably could as well, but something I recommend. So back to those two types of people. Low context people. Let their words speak for themselves. Right? They prefer to be more direct, relying on what is explicitly stated in their speech. Low contexters by nature tend to be I think people. They will say what they mean, wanting to be as clear as possible. Hi, I'm mostly low context. Word meanings and concepts are discussed because not all people in the conversation think alike and may interpret things differently, right? A diverse individual focused collective of people are included and acknowledged in their speech. So one-on-one, they're acknowledging the autonomy of others and that they are individuals with different experiences. And in groups, low context people tend to explain a bit more to make sure that everyone is included in terminology and communication. Explicit, direct, and verbal communications, such as speech, are relied on heavily. The message carries greater weight verbally because the tone, body language, and intentions may not be familiar to everyone, right? And body language and tone in that sense are often even bigger and more, I don't know, theatrical, because it's understood that low context people will more likely pick up less on subtle cues, right? Versus high context people who recognize and routinely use implied messages. And they are aware of verbal and nonverbal cues that let them understand the speaker's meaning. Come on. High contexters, by nature, tend to be I feel people. They will rely on people picking up on nonverbal cues like they do, right? It's assumed in high context conversation that those in the conversation will think in the same way that they do and understand an underlying message without further elaboration. Implicit, indirect, and nonverbal methods to relay information are often favored, such as facial expressions, eye movement, tone of voice, and other body language. The situation, people, and nonverbal elements are, to high context people, more important than spoken words. And interpersonal relationships with other people in the conversation are emphasized. Trust, accuracy of information, and shared experiences, like exformation, more on that in a bit, are valued in high context communications. Now, Rob says, it's all overwhelming, even listening to this. Like my wife talks, I don't know, I just listen, but if I say anything, she'll clam up and I think we both feel bad. Rob, I hear you and I understand. Some people are very verbal and can talk. Other people have a harder time processing quickly and take a little bit more. So it can help to move from a verbal conversation to text messaging or email, or to start out with one point at a time. Like I might say all of these things, but if I were talking to you individually, I would start with one point, make sure that you and I are in agreement and understanding on that point before moving forward, right? Like my partner, I can come at him and be like, talk, 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 talk. And he will just go, and not really know what to say, right? And I know this about him. KS, to me, the fear of being direct is not the fear, I think. It is rejection or fear. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Being direct means that if you are 100% clear, then if somebody rejects you or doesn't agree with you or whatever, you know that you were clear about it and they're rejecting that concept. They're rejecting that idea or whatever. Whereas if you're not clear, if you kind of beat around the bush, then you can tell yourself, oh, they didn't really understand me, and it's okay, right? Yeah, nonverbal cues are hard for me. Not surprising. And honestly, what you're going to find is that in a lot of cultures, masculine or assigned male at birth people are more often low context, while feminine or assigned female at birth people are often higher context. So we'll actually have a live on the I think versus I feel communication challenges coming up sometime into the future. Giovanni says, I feel his struggle. Yeah, I mean, and I know this about me, and I learned in our relationship that because I love him, I needed to change how I communicated with him, because I didn't want him to feel overwhelmed or bulldozed by my ability to verbalize. Cobalt says, I think I have a low context brain, but a high context face. Resting high context face, huh? Sabyasachi, that happens often with me, like how your partner reacts. So now you know, right? Like you can say, holy fudge buckets. Now I have a talking point that I can communicate to any potential partners. Hey, could we try these things, like moving the conversation to written so I have time to think through my answer and get back to you? Or could we focus on one talking point at a time? Maybe we bullet out the points we want to talk about and we focus on one at a time and make sure that we understand each other before moving on and building onto that. Shalimar says, clicked in my head that this sounds like ask versus guess conversations and communication. That's exactly what it is. Ask versus guess is a popular way of referring to high context and low context. Or rather, ask is low context, guess is high context. Celine says, for me, I use both kinds, I think and I feel. And ideally, we will all learn, at least in our relationships, to use both, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Rob says, we are similar. We've moved from a traditional marriage to more open, so we're okay, but I think it can be better. I want to hear it all, regardless of my reactions. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, though, that knowing how you hear or take things in best is a good step for communication, right? So, of course, the two styles, high context and low context, can have a difficult time communicating because low contexters say what they mean and are often baffled when others read so much more into their statements than what's actually said. Whereas high contexters are subtle and get frustrated when what they say is not received or understood, when they feel like they have said it over and over, right? As a low context person, I've said something like, hey, I really like you and I enjoy your company. I'd love to see more of you if you're open to it. And then heard later that that person I said that to was trying to figure out what I meant. Huh? thought I said it. I like you. I'd like to see more of you if you're open to it. I said it, right? Are you loving this content? Are you getting something out of it? I hope you are. And did you know that I've recently started offering coaching? So if you would like to spend some one-on-one time with me, supercharging your relationships with a custom plan, for example, a custom communication plan based on your personal needs or you and your partner's personal needs, then visit me at coachnookie.curiouser.life. Of course, you are always welcome to join me for these free live events or to join one of the membership options or workshops. Some of you are going to want more and will thrive in a personal accountability setting, and you constantly asked for it, so I'm offering it. Now, let's get back to getting curious. Cobalt says, isn't it a spectrum? Like two people can be both low context, but one is lower. Oh, absolutely. It's a huge spectrum. And again, as we go through life, we're going to learn better how to engage. And actually, there's more coming. So yes, Cobalt, it is a spectrum. It is a spectrum in people. It is a spectrum in relationships. Some people are going to be high or low context in one area and the opposite in another. KS says, there are some people you can't communicate with. Sure. I have actually said to people, hey, you seem like a really nice person. Our communication styles are not a good fit. Thank you so much. Best of luck to you. Right? Because it's just too much hassle for me to get something started when I have to struggle, much less thinking about further down the road if we actually get involved with that kind of struggle on a regular basis. Ugh. Right? So just over a week ago, I went live with the topic of what is effective communication. And of course, for those of you who know me, one of the things I talked about was how we define words, because effective communication depends greatly on a shared body of knowledge between the persons communicating. So in using words, sounds, and gestures, I, for example, the speaker, am using a huge body of information that is rarely discussed, though it's constantly implied. Exformation, like information, only replace the IN with EX. Exformation, the assumed knowledge and shared understanding that is not explicitly spoken in communication. Right? Or another way of putting it is exformation is everything we do not actually say, but have in our heads when or before we say anything at all. Whereas information is the measurable, demonstrable utterance we actually come out with. So exformation refers to explicitly discarded information or information not spoken, but assumed to be known or understood. Exformation and the idea of it is one of the reasons I, in these lives and in my writings and so on and so forth, so often define the words that are central to my discussions with you, so that we can start on the same page. We're starting low context. Because as Federico Fellini said, a different language is a different vision of life, right? So even if you disagree with how I use or define a word, simply knowing my definition makes our communication much easier. KS says, I would like coaching, but I'm single. I can still give you coaching. We can talk about what it means to communicate in your search. We can talk about how to communicate yourself more authentically. We can talk about boundaries. We can even talk about dating. I run a dating site and I have been dating online for a long time. I have a pretty clear picture of what works and what doesn't. So up to you, no pressure. Hate selling, hate it. Calvin says, I'm in charge of an organization, but it's one older guy that's been there all along, humiliating me in front of the lodge. He was out of order and made me really look bad. He was out of order. I defended, but my submissive side took over. I would say it's not even just your submissive side. I would say it's conflict avoidance. And again, because this is you, Calvin, I would say definitely I'm feeling like the boundaries workshop would be really good for you because it allows you to learn how to state things without necessarily going into conflict. Sabyasachi says, this may be a kind of stereotyping, but is this the reason women, AFAB, understand better nonverbal communication than men, AMAB? It is to a certain extent. So the idea that men's and women's brains are wired differently has a root in reality. It's not quite as big a gap as that whole, what is it? Men are from Mars, women are for Venus thing. Although those books made some excellent points. But think of it this way. In a lot of cultures, AFAB people, assigned female at birth, or femme presenting folks, are assumed to be more subtle, more caring, more considerate, and are treated in that way and socialized to be that way. Whereas AMAB, assigned male at birth, or masculine presenting folks, are assumed to be more aggressive, more direct, more confrontational, and are socialized that way. Right? So you can see where the clash comes into play. And of course, it is not gender specific. I tend to be more low context, more direct, more, hey, this is the way I am. If you're this way, great. Let's get together and create something that's bigger than the sum of our parts, right? Whereas my partner, who is a man and assigned male at birth, tends to be more high context, more I feel. He is absolutely the empathic one of the two of us. So while these things often run along traditional gender lines, they do not always run along traditional gender lines. And it's important to look at the actual behaviors and the signs and signals versus assuming it's going to be one way or another. Right? So, fun fact, going back to exformation, the core of memes in social media today rely on exformation. You have to know enough of the pop culture references to be able to get it, right? Or to really understand what makes them funny. Slang and in-group language is also based on exformation. So, for example, do you know what these terms mean? How about sus? Like, as in, that's totally sus. Something questionable or dishonest, short for suspicious. Temple garment. It's a Mormon garment of the holy priesthood, which a lot of people don't know unless they're Mormon, right? How about yeet? To throw, right? Certain generations aren't really familiar with that word. What about eschatology? The Catholic study of end things, like the end of an individual life. That's very specific, right? Very in group. Or how about Munt? Like, the bike is not working. It's Munt. Australian, for broken or unusable. Not so much heard in the Northern Hemisphere, right? How about monoromantic? Like, hey, it's me. It can either mean romantic with one person at a time, or depending on your context or your in-group, romantic with only one gender. How about beta bucks, which is an incel term and refers to unattractive men who use an abundance of money to keep mildly attractive women by their side, right? Or what about the meme, girl yelling in a guy's ear at a music festival, which is a spin-off of the Melk Edinburgh, sometimes called guy explaining meme. The shared reference of being loudly explained to by someone in a social situation and feeling both disinterested and trapped is central to the meme's expression, popularity, and humor. KS says, they say men are logical and women are emotional. The challenge with that is that A, it's just not true. It's just not. And B, the people who say that tend to undervalue emotions and overvalue the seeming of being right. And I think that's kind of a shitty way of looking at the world, right? I tend to be more logical than my partner. However, I deeply appreciate and value his emotions and insights in ways that I could never do for myself. And he makes my life better and easier and makes me a more compassionate and kind human being. Like, my life is 1,000 times better for having his higher context feeling in my life. Rob says, do you think, or have you found cucks are more communicative in a specific way? I would say yes and no. No. People who identify as cucks overall, I would say, are just like any other human, man, person, whatever, on the planet. I would say the people who are more successful, who have successful and loving and bonded cuckolding relationships, have probably learned to communicate in a more specific and collaborative way, because that's what you need for a relationship that is what I would consider high risk, right? Danger zone, edge case scenarios, right? Chaos says bloke is a guy in England. Yeah, absolutely. Cobalt says everyone is logical and emotional at the same time. Yep. And sometimes one or the other is going to take over, but you never really know. So your best bet in any relationship conversation is to value what both people bring. Again, make it collaborative versus combative. Calvin says, I agree because I'm very sensitive. Yeah, so exactly. And if we went by what Calvin thinks and feels, then Calvin might say, well, I'm sensitive and I feel deeply, whereas my partners have always been, maybe a little cooler and more logical. So that means that, assigned male at birth people are more feely and women are not, which is actually, interestingly enough, a lot of where incels sort of come from. is they sort of say women are these hard cases and men just want their love and will improve with their love. And of course, the sex that they're entitled to. So it's a perspective, right? It's an in-group thing. Who are you polling? So I heard exactly what you meant. If you ever said something to someone and had them take it very differently from what you meant, based on how they were reading you or reading your tone or reading the situation, because that's their X-formation stepping in the way. Assuming that you are working from the same data set of behaviors and language that they are. Partially because it's really hard for humans to know anything else, anything than their own viewpoint, anything outside their own heads, right? And on the other side of things, I know there are a few people here that were in the live I did about covert contracts, right? And X-formation can play a huge part there. One person thinks they communicated clearly and effectively, and the other missed their meaning entirely because of a different set of experiences and definitions, right? Like when I say on a dating profile that I'm non-monogamous or polyamorous, and someone else reads that and reads that I'm looking for easy sex, or they read that I'm sneaking around, or looking for a sugar daddy, or whatever, because that's been their experience, or what they've been told that means, what society has told them, right? When I say to my pet, ruined, or text him, #ruined, there's a history of our conversations around that topic from the very first evening, nearly 4.5 years ago. Gosh, longer than that. It must have been 8 or 9 years ago, when one of his best friends was listening to him gush about me and told him, "You are so ruined." X-formation is necessary for those types of in-jokes and couple concepts. So let's see what we got here. Gotta love the incels, Giovanni. Oh, yeah. KS says, how to master my emotions. Practice. Lots and lots of practice, and be very intentional, for sure. Cobalt says, one of the funniest threads on FET, the pic where you ask, can you guess what I'm thinking? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So I had like a, I don't know, kind of fun, you know, whatever. Said, can you guess what I'm thinking? And oh my goodness, the variety of responses there. Wow. Yeah. So Giovanni says, being non-monogamous definitely brings the wrong attention sometimes. Yeah. And a lot of people get really frustrated with that or really angry with that. I don't. I just figure people have different X-formation than I do. So then I clarify what I mean and go from there. Now, they may choose to remain willfully ignorant, and I just say, thank you so much. We're not a good fit. Others are like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. May I ask more questions? And we get into the conversation. So in jokes with your friends, couple concepts like #ruined require X-formation, which interestingly enough is a huge point of pain when a breakup happens, because you lose the other half of your stored memories and understanding of many words and ideas. But of course, that's another discussion. In the Effective Communication Live and the live last Tuesday, Love Hurts, but does it really? We talked about how people use and understand the word love based on their personal assumed knowledge and shared understandings. And that's the kicker, isn't it? Shared understanding trips us up pretty freaking awesome often, because the meanings of the words we use are often assumed, but not necessarily shared. And when it comes to love, that there's a tar pit of assumptions. For me, it's a word, a concept, a feeling. For others, it's a commitment, pain, a lifestyle, marriage, and more. And so we disagree and misunderstand, and even more so when people refuse others' rights to their own exformation, when people refuse to honor how other people see the world. Shared exformation is a part of life. For example, when you say dog, I know approximately what you mean. Sure, you might be picturing a Chihuahua while I'm picturing a Dogo Argentino, but we both know what a dog is, because language is in itself a sort of exformation and exformation change both. Right? So what affects exformation or context besides the specific shared experiences between two people? Right? Because again, exformation is what builds high context communication. So let's talk about that. Social norms, how we are raised, what we are taught, all play a part. Culture, like your country, your state, even your town. I once lived in a town where a local pizza spot sold sausage and egg pizza. Brizza. It was a favorite of mine. I've never seen it anywhere else. And no one else I've encountered has ever heard of it, ever, anywhere. Right? Beliefs. Christianity is the majority religion in the US. And so many Christians assume that others share the same ideas of morality, for example. Personal experiences. I've talked about love hurting. I've shared the song Love Hurts that 3 generations of people have emoed to. Add that to breakups and heartache, and some people are going to associate love strongly with pain and suffering, which will affect their communication. And what about neurodivergence? People who are neurodivergent may communicate differently and often work best in low context situations. In high context situations, they can be easily lost because they are not as aware of or focused on the nuances of body language, tone, or social niceties. Those things don't stick in their brains. Y'all with me right now? Oh yeah, Cobalt says. So, why you gotta be so rude and blunt? a lot of small talk involves people not saying what they mean and not talking about things they really care about, which is often confusing for neurodivergent people, and then uncomfortable and confusing for those talking to them who may interpret the neurodivergent as rude, abrupt, or aggressive. It's just not what they're used to. And so rifts in communication happen. Now, it's important to understand that I'm focusing here specifically on miscommunication. I'm not talking about encouraging people to be rude, abrupt, or aggressive towards you in their interactions. You have a right to feel comfortable in conversations and to set boundaries around how you are treated. But how would you know? Well, first, you might want to learn a little bit more about boundaries and ethics in relationships and conversations and how those work, right? And I'm writing a book about boundaries, and you can get the chapters. Actually, I'm editing it right now as I write them live and edit them by joining my Take No Shit workshop at takenoshit.curiouser.life. It's an online at your own pace workshop. There are 7 core modules, and there are new modules added on pretty much a weekly basis to help you think about and grow your boundaries in a strong and healthy way. It's $47. You can get it for as low as $27 with the name your own price. And the price is going up in April. So if you're interested, now is a great time to join. Cobalt says, it's like it gets drowned out by how loud the texture of clothes, the scent in the air, and the brightness of lights, or assume we don't care. Right, exactly. So that goes back to the question, how would you know if someone was being rude, abrupt, or aggressive on purpose, or if you were just having a misunderstanding? Ask a question. Ask a question. Again, Shalimar, this goes back to ask versus guess, right? Instead of guessing that they might be being rude, aggressive, abrupt on purpose, ask. You said that you would do this the way I just did. That felt a bit rude to me, like you were telling me, oh no, sorry, my notes are wrong. You said that you wouldn't do this the way I just did. That felt a bit rude to me, like you were telling me that my way is wrong. Did you mean it that way? Hey, that seemed mean. Could you say that with other words so I can understand you better and maybe not be so defensive? Whoa, you just interrupted me. Come on, I appreciate that you have something to say, and I agree it's important. I'd like to finish my thought first, please, and see how they react. Most people will absolutely react positively when they realize they may have been misunderstood, and will likely react quite poorly when they feel that what they say is more important than how you receive it. Cobalt says, do you agree that I've been improving on that? I would absolutely say yes. I have said to Celine several times that I feel that you taking the boundaries class specifically has helped you grow in leaps and bounds in how you communicate. You seem more aware of the fact that others have radically different experiences from yourself. And this is the key, you want to honor and give them space for those experiences, just like you would want your experiences and your perspective to be honored and given space. So yes, absolutely. Snaps. So do you have any questions about what we've covered today? I know it's a lot. This was definitely a very dense live. So pop them into the chat if you're with me live, or into the comments if you're watching the replay. While I'm giving you time for that, let's look at a few ways to fix the mismatch of high and low context communications, shall we? Take another drink real quick. How do you know where miscommunications are happening, and how do you fix them? Well, in my life, where I tend to be fairly low context as a general rule, I have still gotten caught up in high context snafus. Here's what I've learned. Be intentionally low context with people you don't know well. In building relationships, define how you use specific words or labels. In work situations, know that low context is going to be safer with people not in your industry. For example, CBT. What did those 3 letters mean to you? Cognitive behavioral therapy? Computer-based training? Closed beta test? Compulsory basic training? A course you usually have to take before you ride a moped or a motorcycle on the road. Or cock and ball torture. Something that the kinksters watching probably thought of. 2, realize that no one is going to always get your context, even if you've been together for a decade or 4. That's where arguments and fights come from. 3, when you feel like there is a misunderstanding, get back to the basics. Move to low context and work together, collaborate versus compete, to examine the assumptions and meanings in the language you are using. 4, be curiouser about what went wrong in the communication rather than defensive or aggressive. Harder than it sounds, and it's something I still work on every day. But wanting to know matters, and asking can save a lot of problems that getting angry or upset about would only exacerbate, right? Don't feel betrayed by the misunderstanding. Cue the cure here. Love that they are their own person, and use it as a chance to learn more about them and their experience of the world that led to that difference. And 5, last, but certainly not least, watch your own tendencies to use high context shortcuts in conversation, and try to make allowances for others who may be outside your circle of understanding. Like in jokes with longtime friends when there's a newer person in the group. Right? Cobalt says, yay, I had said that when recommending the course, but I'm biased. Of course you are. That guy over there. Hi. Good to have you. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. So those are the steps that I would suggest taking. For me, the biggest key is to go as low context as possible when I don't know someone well. I start with clear communicative language to the best of my ability. I say what I mean and I mean what I say. And I try to build from there. It's not always going to work. It's not always going to work for you. As KS said earlier, sometimes there are just going to be people that your conversational type just does not mesh with, and that's okay. Right? KS says, words can mean anything. It depends on where you're at and who you are around. Same word, different meaning, different location. Absolutely. And again, that's exformation, and that takes things into a higher context. I mean, it's all in what you learn and how you use language. And then how important is it to you to communicate with your partner? How focused are you on collaboration versus combat, right? Because collaboration means that you both work towards understanding, whereas in combat, you're trying to win. And sometimes it doesn't matter so much if they understand you as long as you get your way. Right? Our subconscious can really be a dick sometimes. So, thank you to all of you for joining me today. If you loved this discussion, please like and share it with others who would enjoy it. And don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you're finding me so you don't miss out on upcoming lives. And speaking of upcoming lives, we have, let's see, where is it here? I'm going to give you a rundown of what I've got coming up. So, there we go. There we go. So, tomorrow, Wednesday, at 7 a.m., starting early in the morning on Wednesday, 7 a.m., I'm going to be discussing Lucky in Love, being interesting versus being beautiful. And then at noon, coming back for another episode of the Dating Kinky Book Club series, Who Are You? Focusing in on the basics. Thursday at 2 p.m., we're going to start a double header that day. So 2 p.m., boundaries. Is trust earned or is it given? And then at 3 p.m., when normally I would go private for my Take No Shit workshop, I'm actually going to go public with this one. I've got a special guest coming in, Miss Betty, somebody I've known for over a decade, talking about having a backbone can be anxiety inducing. So how to build better boundaries, even when you have rejection sensitive anxiety. Super excited about that one, and specifically going public with that one and leaving it up for a week to a week and a half, so that those of you out there can see the types of things that we tackle in the Take No Shit workshop and can benefit from it before I pull that and put that into the private library. Then on Friday, I'm going to be talking about non-monogamy. Do you ask for permission to have relationships with others? And then next Monday, 10 a.m., a relationship is 50-50. Bullshit. And that's what we've got coming up over the next week. Thank you all again for joining me. I hope to see you in another live. I appreciate every single one of you and what you have brought to the conversation. This has been an amazing episode for me. So thank you all. Bye, y'all.